In this video, I'm going to show you 3 rhythmic concepts that will transform your slide guitar improvising. Rhythm is fundamental. Most musicians spend a lot of time worrying about what notes to play and a lot less time on when to play them. Your average listener wouldn't know whether you played a 9th or a 13th, but everyone responds to rhythm in some way. We're going to apply these 3 concepts over 1 or 2 chords so that we can really focus on the rhythm rather than thinking about what to play over chords. The good news is that all of this applies to conventional guitar playing as well, not just slide. Stick around to the end where I'll share a bonus tip, which will help put some of this into another context for you. All right, tip number 1, let's start with space, leaving space, learning to leave more space than you're comfortable with. The space is so important because it gives you time to think about what you're going to play next rather than just letting your fingers run away with you. It allows the listener to absorb what you played and appreciate it before you play something else for them. And probably most importantly, certainly for the other musicians that you're playing with, leaving space allows them to interact with you. And then this becomes a musical conversation rather than you just, playing non-stop and then just kind of coming along for the ride. What we want to get to the point of being able to do is interact musically so that they can feed you ideas, you can feed them ideas, and it will take the music to a whole other level. So I'm going to demonstrate this just over 2 chords. I'm in open E tuning here, so I'm going to do it over the 1 and the 4 chord, the E7 and the A7. The trick here is to play shorter phrases and leave lots of space. And what I'm going to demonstrate, these amounts of space, it's going to seem quite a lot, but it's really important that you kind of reverse what you're doing now, which is more likely that you're playing lots and leaving very small amounts of space. So as I'm doing this, I'm thinking about how someone might interact in the gap. I'm trying to imagine other players playing and having this musical conversation. You just want to focus on short phrases, long gaps. You might take it to the extreme and go, okay, I'm going to play for 1 bar or 2 bars, and then I'm going to leave 4 bars, 6 bars. I might do it over a blues and just leave huge amounts of space. But this is kind of, as I say, reversing what you're probably doing already, just to try and get to a point where it feels comfortable to leave more space. One challenge you'll find with leaving lots of space is that it's easy to lose your place, particularly in a complex chord progression that you don't know very well. So I think one reason that people keep playing is that they can keep track of where they are. And that just means you just got to learn the chord progression that you're soloing over better so that you can stop playing and not lose your place. Okay, number 2 is rhythmic variety or rhythmic interest. Now, to be able to do this, we just need to be confident playing set rhythms. So we need to be able to play quavers. We need to be able to play triplets. We need to be able to play semi-quavers. I'm English, of course, the American versions being 8th notes, triplets, and 16th notes. But, we need to be able to execute those rhythms accurately and then be able to mix them up. Because one of the things that listeners really notice is just repetitive rhythms, and they switch off very quickly. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to play over 1 chord, and I'm just going to go through quavers, triplets, and semi-quavers, just demonstrating how you can focus on those rhythms on their own to start with. Okay, so here's my E7th chord. I'm just playing quarter notes or crotchets. I'm just going to play quavers or 8th notes over this. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and... first step is just to play constant quavers, just a continuous stream, and make sure that's hard to make any musical sense out of it, but just to make sure that you're really on top of those, and then you can break them up. So I'm still thinking quavers, 3 and 4 and 1. Thinking quavers, but I don't have to play every single one. I'll do the same with triplets, continuous triplets, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Same thing, I'll break those triplets up. So I'm still feeling and thinking triplets, but I'm going to play around with them. Sixteenths or semi-quavers, so 4 notes in each beat. So tack, 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 the same thing, I'm going to break them up. I'm still thinking semi-quavers, but I don't have to play every single one. So I'm just demonstrating this by playing over the chord, but you could do it with one note. So you could say go quavers on this, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, or triplets. Or you could do semi-quavers. You know, the goal is just to be able to feel what those feel like. And the principle here is that if you practice those rhythms specifically, then you're going to be able to execute them. If you're just kind of guessing because you're not sure what those rhythms are and you're just trying to play by ear, the chances of them coming out accurate and strong are somewhat slim, I would say. The other thing you could do is you could play scales using this. A major scale. I could think quavers. I could think triplets. I could think semiquavers. And you can do this much slower. I would suggest setting a tempo that you can do this at, where you can do the semiquavers or 16th notes comfortably, and then kind of work backwards from that. But the idea is get comfortable with those first, and then part 2 of tip number 2 is to then mix them up. And this is where the rhythmic variety and interest comes in. And initially I would be deliberately thinking in my head what rhythm I was going to play next. So just, make it a practice where you're thinking, okay, I'm playing triplets now, and then I'm going to switch to quavers. Now I'm going to go to semiquavers, however you want to do it. But actually be deliberate about it. And then the goal is that ultimately, when you're up on stage, you're not thinking about any of this stuff. It's all embedded, and it comes out naturally when you play. So I'll just demonstrate that over that one chord again. So this is still over E, and we'll just mix up those rhythms. So let's start with quavers. So the secret here is to make sure that this is all stuff that you practice. It's not stuff that you go and think about when you play, when you perform, when you get up on stage. This is all a practicing process, and the intention is that if you really focus on these elements, then what happens is it becomes part of your playing. It gets in deep, and it just means that when you go and play, you don't have to think about this stuff, but you've just developed further rhythmic concepts that you're able to bring into your improvising. And these are concepts that often people just don't think about at all or aren't aware of. So even just being aware of them is going to help. Okay, concept number 3 follows on from number 2 in the sense that you won't be able to do it unless you have these rhythms down. And concept number 3 is start and stop. So basically what this means is that you're trying to learn to start and stop your phrases in different places. This is very important because I think one of the most important things about improvising is the element of surprise. The listener doesn't know what you're going to do next. And one thing that makes it very predictable very quickly is if you always start your phrases on the same beat, or you always end them on the same beat. So, initially a lot of people just start on beat 1 every time, and then it becomes the listener after, 2 or 3 phrases knows exactly what's going to happen next, and that element of surprise is lost. So the thing to do here, I'm just going to do this with quavers, but you can do it with all these rhythms. The thing to do here is practice every possibility. So we can start a phrase on beat 1, on the end of 1, on 2, on the end of 2, on 3, and of 3, 4, and of 4. You can write these out, and you can practice just working on them one at a time and just getting used to what that feels like. And again, when you get on stage, you're not going to think about any of this stuff, but if you practice the possibilities, then it's going to come out and you'll have command over it. 2, 3, on 1. 2, 3, 4. Now on the and of 1. 1. 1. Beat 2, 1. The end of 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. 2, 3. 4, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. One of the interesting things there is that as you get to the end of the bar, so the and of 3, 4, or the and of 4, it starts to feel like an anticipation of the next bar. So that's something to bear in mind when you're listening and practicing this. But basically you just need to go through that process with the starting of the phrase, which is easier, and with the ending of the phrase, which is a lot harder to do. But again, it'll have a big impact on the way that you play rhythmically. So I'll just demonstrate. I won't do the whole thing again, but I'll just demonstrate quickly, just practicing some of the stops on different beats, so on different quavers. So I'm going to stop on beat 1. I'll stop on 2. I'll stop on beat 4. So 1, 2. To work on that, the ending of the phrase, which is definitely harder, is just to try and play consistent rhythms, constant rhythms, and that way you can kind of keep track of things. But that definitely takes some work. But then you got control of the beginning and end of your phrase, and then, as I say, when you get on stage, you forget all of this and you just play. As a bonus, think about displacement. So what that means is that you can play the same phrase, but you can start in different places. And what you'll find is it feels quite different. Now, beats 1 and 3 have a similar feel. Beats 2 and 4 are a different feel, but they're related to each other as well. So if I start a phrase on beat 1 and then start it on beat 3, it will have a similar feel. But if I start on beat 1 and then on beat 2, it's going to feel quite different. It's kind of the opposite in terms of the rhythm of the bar. And the same applies to ands, like the and of 1 and the and of 3 are similar, and the and of 2 and the and of 4 are similar to each other. I'll just take a short phrase and I'll just start it on different parts of the bar and just show you how this sounds different. 2, 3, 4. On 2, 1. 4. 3, 4, 1, 2. 4, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So what you find with this is that you can take the same phrase and move it around within the bar and create more music from it. So it's a really useful thing to practice and have under your fingers. As I mentioned a few times, the important thing here is that these are practicing concepts. So practicing leaving space, making sure that you can play these rhythms accurately, which is more challenging with a slide, really, because there is this tendency to kind of float over the time sometimes, rather than playing very precise rhythms. So, this can take some work. And then it's the variety and interest of those rhythms. So once you've got them down, it's mixing them up so that it's not predictable. And then where we start and end phrases is very important. So working on that side of things. And lastly, the displacement, that can add some really interesting stuff into what you're doing, basically with using the same phrases or very similar phrases, but deciding where to start those phrases within the bar. One last thing I'll say that in terms of practicing this is very useful is to record yourself. So it keeps you honest, it allows you to be objective, and to, you know, check if you're really doing what you think you're doing with these rhythms. So just doing it on your phone while you're practicing and then having a listen back is really, really valuable. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, it helps a lot. Comment below if I can help with anything else, and subscribe so you can hear about new content. Happy sliding.